Thank you all for your patience. And we are now going to turn to the questions you submitted before or during the webinar. John?
Great, thanks, Emily. And I would just encourage folks, we have a half dozen or so questions that were submitted during registration, but please utilize the question and answer function in Zoom to submit additional questions as we move through these first set of questions. So Emily, the first question, could Catalyst Fund support be used for coordinating meetings and community events? Or must the support be used for specific on-the-ground conservation outcomes?
Great, thank you. Well, the simple answer is yes. Support can be used for coordinating meetings and otherwise building the network and enlisting stakeholder support. The basic premise of the fund is that building broad-based partnerships is central to successful landscape scale conservation. And that this partnership building takes time and money, and that money to support this pivotal piece of landscape conservation is scarce. In fact, we do not fund what's often called bucks and acres conservation. That being said, we do want to see all this convening and collaboration and partnership building moving toward conservation outcomes on the ground. It can't be meetings for meeting's sake.
Great, thanks, Emily. The next question, can a single organization submit multiple pre-proposals?
A partnership can only submit one proposal, and to choose the right approach, they should read our materials very carefully. That being said, we do not expect partnerships to be 501c3 organizations. And so we expect them to apply through a host organization, a fiscal sponsor organization. And so there may be rare cases where the applicant organization is host to multiple partnerships, in which case, yes, the applicant organization may apply more than once if they're representing multiple partnerships. We'll be looking at the partnership, not the applicant organization.
Great. The next question, when are grants awarded and when would the grant period start?
So grants will be awarded no later than September 1st. And year one funds will be distributed after the grant agreement is signed. So I would say no later than October 1st, depending on the speed of document exchange and signing. And so budgets should start no earlier than September 2020. But after that, when they start and the distribution of funding between year one and year two is discretionary. And we will work with you either during the application or after grant award to find a budget timing and distribution schedule that works best for your success.
Great, thanks, Emily. Then the next question, are national heritage areas a strong fit for the Catalyst Fund?
Ooh, interesting question. National heritage areas are in concept eligible, but please note that the primary purpose of the fund is to support and advance this new pivotal trend of informal collaborative partnerships. So to the extent that national heritage areas already have federal designation and are eligible for specific funding, they're likely to be low on our priority list, even recognizing that federal funding waxes and wanes. So if there is someone on the phone who represents a national heritage area, I would suggest read our materials very closely and make a very strong case for why you should get our funding when you have access to so many other potential funds.
Thanks, Emily. The next question, is the Catalyst Fund considered a private funding source for purposes of matching federal grants?
Yeah, absolutely. The two sources of funding for the Catalyst Fund are private foundations, and so the answer is yes.
Great. Next question. If we are already getting funding from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, are we still eligible to apply for a Catalyst Fund grant?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you may have noticed that we highlight other Doris Duke funding programs in the webinar in case you can take advantage of multiple opportunities. And I would say that the same is true for the Hewlett Foundation. These funders want your partnerships to succeed.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So that's the extent of the questions submitted during the registration process. And now I'm going to turn to the question and answer function on Zoom. I encourage folks to continue to submit their questions there as we'll work through the ones that have come in so far and try to get to everyone's question. The first question here, Emily, can we see successful past proposals?
Well, absolutely. This is year 2 of the Catalyst Fund. But compared to last year, you do have some successful proposals to look at, and the 14 inaugural grants are posted on our website. Simply go to the Catalyst Fund portion of our website, look to the left index bar, and click on funded grants.
Great. Thanks, Emily. We have another question here around if part of our efforts are to meet on site with landowners to provide personalized conservation recommendations, is this considered outreach or is it ineligible as on the ground work?
I would say it's a gray area in that it depends on the context. So if you have a partnership that has come together, a broad-based partnership, not simply a couple of land trusts doing business as usual, but has a real vision and mission and broad-based partnership. And a piece of that is outreach to landowners, to bring them in as stakeholders, to bring them in as conservation easement holders. That is a permissible use of catalyst funds. So it depends on whether there's a strong, broader context and a real partnership underway.
Thanks, Emily. A question about wetland monitoring, assessment, and restoration. Is that eligible under the Catalyst Fund?
That sounds too specific to be partnership building in the context of the Catalyst Fund.
Right. A question around political lobbying. We note in the RFP that political lobbying is not funded. Can you explain how you define political lobbying? And can our application include county, state, and/or federal resource agencies engaged in collaborative planning?
Well, we absolutely encourage partnerships that have local, state, federal involvement. I think part of the goal of these landscape scale partnerships is to bring people together who have a shared vision for the landscape, but haven't traditionally worked together. Um, so that's absolutely fine. Education to agencies is fine. Direct political lobbying is not okay. It's not okay from the funders uh, who provide the funding for the Catalyst Fund. I'm not sure I can quote chapter and verse there. So I think if you are worried you're on the line of education versus lobbying, you should be in touch with John directly with a specific question.
Great, thanks, Emily. If a partnership is divided into multiple working groups or topic areas, can the Catalyst Fund grant be used to increase capacity for a specific working group within a broader partnership?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Just make the case that you have an overall partnership, you have priorities, you want to be building your outreach with this specific group, or your subcommittee is working on conservation planning. And this is where you need the funding over the next year or 2 years. That's absolutely permissible. Just make your case.
Great, thanks, Emily. In in our discussion on fund priorities, we make mention of formal and informal governance. Um, can you provide detail about what kind of governance is expected through these partnerships? For example, if the partnership makes a collective decision as a group without a formal voting process or leading authority, is that sufficient governance structure?
These general questions are always hard to answer, but I think the answer would be yes. Um, I generally say move forward with a partnership with as little governance as you can get away with. At the building stage, you're still trying to bring people together around the table, develop trust, develop a shared vision for a landscape. You don't necessarily want to spend 3 hours writing up a formal charter if you're making progress strategically and programmatically. And so, um, if you're still at a consensus based partnership and it's working for you, I think that's absolutely fine. I think you should feel your way, and every partnership is going to be a little bit different. Um, the one thing we do like to see, which is different than governance, is that you're not at the starting stage, that you have gotten through those early meetings, you've built enough trust, that you have a vision for the landscape, you have agreed that you want to work together, and you have a structure for moving ahead. That, as we say, you've gone from collective vision and you're moving to collective action. And this is where an infusion of funding will really make a catalytic difference as you move forward. And maybe part of that is hiring a coordinator who helps you have more regular meetings and develops a bit of a governance and committee structure and so forth. So we're not looking for a formal constitution when you're at this early stage of growth.
Great, thanks, Emily. We have another question about uh, transboundary partnerships. If a partnership straddles the US-Canada boundary, but is led by a US 501c3 organization, can that be eligible for submitting a proposal to the Catalyst Fund?
No, absolutely. Those partnerships are very eligible. The funding is for work in the U.S., so that we ask you to focus your work primarily on the U.S. side of the boundary. But we are already funding several cross-boundary partnerships.
Thanks, Emily. Um, a couple questions around what types of activity that would be eligible for submitting a proposal around. Um, the first here is, would expanding a pilot conservation planning effort within a portion of the landscape to the entire landscape be an eligible use of Catalyst Fund support?
Well, again, context is everything. That sounds like a great use of funds if it's within the context of a partnership that's building an enduring partnership and trying to expand conservation planning to a larger part of the landscape. Absolutely.
Great. Similar theme, Emily. If a partnership has a defined mission statement and goal, but is needing to revisit some objectives for achieving those goals in light of emerging topics like climate change, is that a suitable fit for the Catalyst Fund?
Yes, in concept, that sounds very suitable. This kind of collaborative thinking, planning, bringing people in, coming to consensus around changing circumstances is exactly the kind of funding that isn't often available, and we would like to provide. And one comment that we make in the guidance document on our steps to success chart, we talk about the starting stage, the building stage, the conserving stage, but they're not always strictly linear, and some of them go on simultaneously, and sometimes partnerships need to loop back. And we really encourage people to look at those charts, but with a grain of salt and with an understanding of what you need to do with the people you're working with and the landscape you live on. We look to you to tell us what it is you need to move forward.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I have a couple questions here that are all sort of dancing around the concept of our definition of a landscape. So what I'm going to do, Emily, is I'm going to put a broad question to you and then follow up with a couple specifics after that. And so the first broad question is, can you explain a little bit more about our definition of landscape?
Sure. So in our materials, and I know there's an FAQ question on this, um, we define landscape to be an interconnected geographic area that exceeds jurisdictional boundaries, yet functions as and is perceived as a single unit because of ecological, cultural, and other societal reasons. Landscapes can be urban, suburban, rural, working, or wild in context, or any combination thereof. Um, we should also note that landscapes do not have to be discrete. We see many examples of nested landscapes where a smaller landscape can be identified as a unit within a much larger landscape. And we have many examples of that in collaborative landscape conservation. But I would say most importantly, a landscape is what a partnership defines it to be based on geography, social construct, and other. So once you apply to the Catalyst Fund, you'll already have a vision for conservation of your landscape. And part of your job in the application will be to tell us why this particular geographic area is suitable for a partnership and why it's on the cusp, why your partnership around that landscape is on the cusp of catalytic growth.
Thanks, Emily. That's super helpful. So sort of a couple related questions to based on that theme. Is there a geographic scale of landscape that is going to be most competitive within the Catalyst Fund?
We're really open. I'm in New England, where some of the partnerships are 500,000 acres or smaller. There are partnerships both in the East and the West where they're significantly larger. And so we are open as long as you make a case that you have a partnership that can work at that scale and that will be able to advance that partnership and conservation gains over time as a result.
Great, thanks, Emily. The next question that was sort of related to this theme, we have a lot of language in the applicant guidance document about what will or will not constitute the place-based definition, the landscape definition of our landscape conservation partnerships. If a landscape is part of a larger federally designated area and lies entirely within a single state, is that going to be ineligible based on some of the language we use in the applicant guidance document, or is that landscape still eligible?
If it's within a federally designated area,
but not defined by is the question. It does work within a federally designated area, but it's not defined by the federally designated area.
Yeah, I'm still having a hard time parsing that. If it's a landscape within a national forest or within a, I am not entirely sure, and I would suggest that the person who asked that question might follow up with John specifically, because we don't want to lead you astray, but that's a hard question to answer in the abstract.
Sounds good, Emily, thanks. I'm going to transition to another question on stages of partnership development. Can you explain a little more the difference between the building stage and the conserving stage, and in particular, if a partnership is seeming to straddle the line between those, is there any clarity that can be offered there or expanded explanation?
Well, I would certainly recommend that you read all of our materials carefully, and it's very hard to provide much more clarity to that because every partnership is going to be a little bit different. But certainly we're looking for building stage partnerships where a $10,000 to $25,000 grant will really make a catalytic difference, where they can hire their first coordinator, they can get their first conservation plan going, they will build that momentum and never look back. A lot of conserving partnerships already have a significant budget, and $25,000 will be more operating costs than catalytic funding. So that's one issue I would look at before you apply. We really want this funding to make a difference. We're not looking to provide operating support. Other than that, you know, the building it does merge a bit into conserving, although we're not looking at, you know, people actually going out and purchasing land, but some of the stepping stone activities that we identify in the chart as you build that momentum, build the conservation plan, build the coordination funding, and really solidify what before was an emerging partnership. And I'm sorry not to be more specific. If there are people on the phone who still have very specific questions, please email them to us, because every partnership is different, and we're threading a needle here where we're trying to impose a steps to success chart while also saying you have to be flexible and aware of your own circumstances in your own landscape, and we want to support you in that. So, please feel free to email us if you have very specific questions.
Great, thanks, Emily. A somewhat related question: if a partnership already has coordination staff and is doing some on-the-ground conservation work, but is in an active process of trying to broaden its partnership and stakeholder involvement, is that going to be something that's eligible?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You just have to define specifically why you want the funding, what it's going to accomplish. Are there specific stakeholders? Increasing momentum towards XYZ conservation goals. Just be very clear in what the funding is going to accomplish, and that sounds very eligible.
Great, thanks, Emily. Encourage folks to continue to submit their questions through the question and answer function in Zoom. I think we have one or two more that we haven't got to yet, but again, please continue submitting those, and we'll keep moving through them as they come in. The next question, Emily, is related to match. Where must the match funding come from? Can a 501c3 organization apply on behalf of the partnership, but have the match funding coming from an organization that is outside the partnership?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. If if you have a partnership and the applicant organization is only one of many partners, so if another organization involved in the partnership says, hey, I can put in $5,000, or if all the partners can put in $1,000 each, or however you can match that, is did that answer the question, John?
Can you hear me, Emily?
Yes, I can. Did I get lost for a
I
second?
I think you got lost for a few seconds there at the end of your answer. Um, I think you did answer the question though.
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic premise is that partnerships involve many, many people and organizations. We recognize that partnerships, I would be surprised if any building partnership is a 501c3, or that even a conserving partnership would be a 501c3. So we expect there to be an applicant organization. If they're putting in match money, great, but we certainly would accept other partners putting in match money, either through a dues structure or a generous partner or two, or a foundation match. All of that is acceptable. And same is true with the in-kind match. That can be from your partners putting in time at the meetings and to run with certain issues. It can be your local volunteers putting in time and providing the coffee and donuts at the meeting. It takes a village to build a partnership, so to speak, and I would imagine you all have a lot of in-kind match already lined up, because that's the nature of a partnership.
Great, thanks so much, Emily. Have a question here from a partnership or organization that is working to develop a new and creative model for financing conservation. Um, is that going to be an eligible project within the Catalyst Fund?
I mean, perhaps if it's part of a partnership and it's how their partnership is going to move forward. But it really has to be grounded in the priorities of the Catalyst Fund. It can't be abstract. It can't be to help the field overall or a regional part of the field. That applicant would have to say, here is our landscape partnership. We're in the building stage, and we really feel that we need to come up with a funding model. And that's our highest priority. And here's the context of why it's our highest priority. And here's why this is going to be catalytic.
Great, thanks, Emily. Encourage folks, if you have any questions that are continuing to linger with you, by all means, please submit them. I'm just scrolling through the questions, Emily, and I think we have largely addressed the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I don't see anything else coming in right now. So,
well, thank you, John, and thank all of you for your patience. Sitting in on a webinar, and we can't see each other, but we hope this has been helpful. You can email us with additional questions. We have a lot of resources posted on our website. We have already updated our FAQs based on last week's webinar questions. We'll do so again based on this week. We'll also be posting a recording of this webinar on the Catalyst Fund page of our website. So thank you again for your participation today and for your interest in the Catalyst Fund. Please just email any remaining questions before March 10th to John Peterson. And thank you again, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great afternoon.